My name is Sarah Martinez, and I thought I knew what rock bottom looked like. 3 jobs, 12-hour shifts at Mel's Diner on Route 9, and still couldn't make rent without choosing between groceries and my daughter's asthma medication. You know that feeling when you're so tired you forget what day it is? That was my Tuesday. Every day. But sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor about timing. Sometimes it sends you exactly what you need in a package you'd never expect. And sometimes that package comes in the form of a man wearing a $2,000 suit who orders black coffee and leaves his wallet on table 6. Let me paint you the picture. It's 2:47 a.m. on a Wednesday that feels like it's been going on for 3 years. The fluorescent light above booth 4 keeps flickering like it's sending Morse code to the roaches, and I'm wiping down tables that haven't been truly cleaned since the Clinton administration. That's when he walks in. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of confident that comes from never having to check your bank balance before buying coffee. His shoes probably cost more than my car. He sits at table 6, orders black coffee, and pulls out this leather portfolio that screams serious business. Now, I've served plenty of rich folks rolling through on their way to wherever important people go at 3 a.m. Usually they treat me like furniture with a pulse, but this guy? He says thank you when I refill his cup, makes eye contact, asks how my night's going like he actually wants to know the answer. For 47 minutes, he sits there making phone calls in this quiet, measured voice. Something about acquisitions and board meetings and numbers that make my yearly income look like loose change. And here's where it gets interesting. When he leaves, he's in such a hurry that he doesn't just forget to tip. He forgets his wallet. Thick black leather, monogrammed with the initials RH. And when I open it to find some ID so I can return it, my heart nearly stops. The driver's license reads Robert Harrison, as in Harrison Industries, as in the billionaire who owns half the commercial real estate in our state, as in the guy whose company just bought the strip mall where Mel's Diner pays rent. But here's what really gets me. There's a photo tucked behind his credit cards. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile that could power the whole diner. Written on the back in careful handwriting, for Grandpa, love, Emma. And suddenly, this titan of industry becomes just another grandfather carrying pictures of his granddaughter, just like how I carry pictures of my Mia. Now, any reasonable person would call the number on his business card, arrange to return the wallet, maybe hope for a decent reward. But reasonable went out the window around the time I started working 3 jobs to keep my head above water. Because tucked in with the family photos and platinum credit cards, there's something else. A bank statement that accidentally got folded in with some receipts. And the numbers on that statement, they're the kind of numbers that could solve problems, not just my problems. Problems for every single parent working double shifts, every family choosing between heat and groceries, every kid who needs medication their parents can't afford. I'm standing in that empty diner at 3:30 in the morning, holding more money in plastic cards than I'll see in my lifetime, and you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking about my daughter Mia, home alone because I can't afford a babysitter for the overnight shift. I'm thinking about Mrs. Chen next door, who's been eating cat food because her social security doesn't stretch far enough. I'm thinking about Tommy, the cook, who's been hiding the fact that he's been sleeping in his car since his landlord raised the rent. What would you do? And before you answer that, let me tell you what happened next. I took that wallet home, not to steal from it, mind you, but to think, to really think about what kindness means when you're drowning and someone accidentally drops you a life preserver. I researched Robert Harrison. Turned out he's not just rich. He's the kind of rich that comes with responsibility. His company's foundation donates millions to charity every year. He's built schools, funded hospitals, created scholarship programs. This is a man who understands that wealth means nothing if you're not lifting others up with you. So I made a choice that probably sounds crazy to anyone who's never had to decide between paying rent and buying insulin. I used one of his credit cards. Not for a shopping spree, not for anything selfish. I paid for Mrs. Chen's groceries for a month. I covered Tommy's motel room until he could find something permanent. I bought Mia's asthma medication and still had enough left over to prepay our utilities for 3 months. The total? $4,736. Not even a rounding error in Robert Harrison's world, but a complete life change in mine. And then I did something that really separates this story from every other tale of desperation you've heard. I wrote him a letter, not an apology, not a confession, a proposal. I sat at my kitchen table for 6 hours crafting the most important piece of writing I'd ever attempt, explaining exactly what I'd done with his money and exactly why I'd done it. I told him about the community he'd accidentally invested in, about Mrs. Chen, who had been a teacher for 40 years before her pension got cut, about Tommy, a veteran who'd been failed by every system designed to help him, about myself, a mother trying to prove to her daughter that hard work and integrity matter, even when the world seems designed to punish both. I told him he could call the police, press charges, destroy my life with a phone call. Or he could meet me at Mel's Diner at 3 a.m. the following Wednesday and let me show him what his $4,000 had really purchased. Then I mailed the letter along with his wallet, everything returned except those $4,000 that had already changed 4 lives forever. You might be wondering what kind of person takes such a massive risk based on a 47-minute impression of a stranger. The answer is simple. Someone who's got nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Someone who's tired of being invisible, tired of watching good people suffer while others have more money than they could spend in 10 lifetimes. Someone who believes that sometimes you have to break the rules to fix what's broken. The week between sending that letter and Wednesday at 3 a.m. felt like the longest week of my life. Every time the phone rang, I expected to hear a police officer's voice. Every time someone walked into the diner, I wondered if they were there to arrest me. Mia noticed I was jumpy, kept asking if everything was okay. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that mommy might go to jail for trying to help people? But Wednesday came, and so did Robert Harrison. Same table, same black coffee, same leather portfolio. This time, though, he wasn't alone. He brought someone with him, a woman in her 30s, sharp suit, carrying a briefcase that screamed lawyer. My heart sank into my stomach. This was it. This was how my story ended. Not with triumph, but with handcuffs and a perp walk and my daughter wondering why mommy wasn't coming home. But as they settled into the booth, Robert Harrison did something unexpected. He smiled. Not the practiced corporate smile I'd expected. A real smile, the kind that reaches your eyes and means something. He introduced the woman as Jennifer Walsh, his personal attorney, and then he said 6 words that changed everything. "Sarah, we need to talk business." Turns out, my letter hadn't just impressed him. It had inspired him. He'd spent the week researching everything I'd told him about our community. He'd visited Mrs. Chen, who'd invited him in for tea and told him stories about her students. He'd tracked down Tommy and offered him a job managing properties for Harrison Industries. He'd even looked into our landlord, discovered a pattern of rent gouging that had been flying under the radar for years. But more than that, he'd seen something in my letter that even I hadn't realized I'd written. A business plan. A way to systematically identify and assist people who were struggling not because they weren't working hard enough, but because the system was designed to keep them struggling. People who needed a hand up, not a handout. People who, given the right opportunity, could change their own lives and help others do the same. He called it the Community Investment Initiative. I called it a miracle. The proposal was simple but revolutionary. Instead of traditional charity that created dependency, we would create a network of community advocates. People like me who understood struggle intimately and could identify others who just needed the right intervention at the right moment. We would operate with a budget of $50,000 per community, funds that would be used strategically to solve problems that prevented good people from succeeding. The return on investment wouldn't be measured in dollars. It would be measured in families kept together, communities strengthened, lives transformed. And I would be the pilot program director, not because I was the most qualified person on paper, but because I had proven I understood the weight of desperate choices and the power of strategic kindness, because I had shown I could be trusted with someone else's resources and use them to build rather than destroy. The salary he offered was more than I'd made in my best year working 3 jobs. The opportunity he offered was bigger than anything I dared imagine, but the real gift was something else entirely: respect. Recognition that my experience, my perspective, my understanding of what it meant to be invisible in America's economy was not just valuable, it was essential. 6 months later, I'm sitting in an office that used to intimidate me, reviewing case files that represent real people facing real problems that we now have real solutions for. Mrs. Chen isn't just getting her groceries paid for anymore. She's running an after-school tutoring program funded by our initiative, teaching kids whose parents work multiple jobs just like I used to. Tommy isn't just managing properties. He's created a support network for homeless veterans, using his own experience to help others navigate the maze of bureaucracy that kept him sleeping in his car. And me? I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm building something that matters. The Community Investment Initiative has expanded to 12 cities. We've helped over 300 families transition from crisis to stability. We've prevented 47 evictions, funded 62 emergency medical procedures, and kept 18 small businesses from closing. But those numbers don't tell the real story. The real story is in the details that don't make it into quarterly reports. Like Marcus, the single father who was about to lose custody of his kids because he couldn't afford to fix his car to get to his court-mandated parenting classes. We didn't just pay for the repairs. We connected him with a legal aid attorney who discovered the custody case was based on fabricated evidence. Marcus now has full custody and a job with Harrison Industries' maintenance division. Or like Sophia, the college student who was one semester away from dropping out because her financial aid had been cut due to a paperwork error. We didn't just pay her tuition. We hired her as a part-time researcher for the initiative, giving her work experience that led to a full-time offer after graduation. She's now running our newest satellite office in Phoenix. The thing about strategic kindness is that it multiplies. Every person we help becomes someone who can help others. Every crisis we prevent creates space for growth. Every family we stabilize becomes a foundation for community strength. But it's not all success stories and feel-good moments. Running a program like this means making impossible choices every day. We get more applications than we can fund. For every family we can help, there are 10 more that we have to turn away. And some of our interventions fail. Some people aren't ready for the help we offer, or their problems are too complex for our resources to solve. There's Juan, whose gambling addiction kept sabotaging every opportunity we created for him. After the third time he used our emergency housing fund to buy lottery tickets, we had to cut ties. It broke my heart, but I learned that enabling someone isn't the same as helping them. There's Patricia, who seemed perfect for our small business loan program, until we discovered she was using the funding to pay back money she'd borrowed from loan sharks. By the time we realized what was happening, she'd disappeared, and we were out $15,000. These failures taught me something crucial about the difference between charity and investment. Charity asks nothing in return. Investment requires accountability. Our program works because we don't just give people money. We give them opportunities, and we expect them to use those opportunities to build something better. Not everyone is ready for that responsibility. Not everyone can handle the pressure of being invested in. But for those who can, the transformation is nothing short of miraculous. Take the initiative's biggest success story, the Riverside Community Garden Project. What started as a simple intervention to help 3 families avoid eviction became a neighborhood transformation. We discovered that their landlord was planning to demolish their building to put in a parking lot for a casino that was never actually going to be built. Instead of just paying their rent, we researched the property records and found out the landlord had been lying to investors about the development potential. We connected the families with a lawyer who helped them organize a tenants' rights campaign. But here's where it gets interesting. During the legal process, we learned that the empty lot next to their building had been abandoned for 15 years due to a paperwork error that nobody had bothered to fix. With Robert Harrison's connections at City Hall, we were able to get the lot donated to the community for $1. The families we'd originally helped organize their neighbors to transform that empty lot into a community garden that now feeds 47 families and generates enough surplus produce to supply 2 local food banks. The garden became a catalyst for other improvements. Property values in the neighborhood have increased by 30%, but because we helped establish a community land trust, the original residents can't be priced out. Crime in the area has dropped by 60% because there are always people in the garden, creating natural community surveillance. 3 small businesses have opened to serve the increased foot traffic: a tools and seeds shop, a cafe that buys produce from the garden, and a child care center for parents who work in the garden. What started as a crisis intervention for 3 families became an economic revitalization for an entire neighborhood, and that's just one project in one city. But success brings its own complications. As word spread about what we were doing, the requests started pouring in from everywhere. Politicians wanted photo opportunities. Other foundations wanted to partner with us. Journalists wanted to write stories about the Billionaire and the Waitress who were revolutionizing charity. I found myself giving speeches at conferences, being interviewed on podcasts, appearing on panels about innovative social programs. It was surreal, going from invisible to having people hang on my every word. But with visibility came scrutiny. There were critics who said we were just putting band-aids on systemic problems. Others accused us of being paternalistic, deciding who deserved help and who didn't. Some questioned whether a program founded on what was technically theft could ever be truly ethical. The harshest criticism came from other anti-poverty organizations who saw us as competition for limited donor dollars. They argued that our model was unsustainable because it relied too heavily on the whims of one wealthy benefactor. What would happen to all these communities when Robert Harrison got bored or died or decided to spend his money on something else? It was a fair question, and one that kept me awake at night. But Robert had thought of that too. After our first year of operation, he established an endowment fund with $100 million, managed by a board that included community leaders from every city where we operated. The fund was designed to continue our work even if something happened to Harrison Industries or to Robert himself. More importantly, he'd been training other wealthy individuals and corporations to replicate our model in their own communities. The Community Investment Initiative wasn't just a program anymore. It was becoming a movement. But movements attract opposition, and ours was no exception. The first real attack came from an unexpected source. City Councilman Richard Graves, whose district included 3 of our most successful project sites. Graves had built his political career on being the champion of the working class, the man who fought against gentrification and corporate interference in neighborhood development. Our success in revitalizing communities was threatening his narrative that only government programs could solve poverty. He started small, questioning our tax-exempt status at city council meetings, demanding audits of our spending, suggesting that we were somehow scamming taxpayers even though we didn't use public funds. When that didn't gain traction, he escalated. He held press conferences accusing us of economic colonialism, claiming that we were imposing our values on communities without consulting residents. Never mind that our entire model was built on community leadership and local decision-making. Never mind that we had waiting lists of neighborhood groups begging us to work with them. Graves had found an angle that played well with progressive activists who were suspicious of wealthy philanthropists. But the real attack came when Graves discovered the truth about how our partnership started. Someone had leaked the story about the wallet, the credit card, the letter. Graves held a press conference calling me a criminal and demanding that the district attorney investigate our organization for money laundering. How can we trust a program founded on theft? He asked the cameras. How can we let a confessed criminal decide which families deserve help and which don't? The media loved the story. Billionaire and former waitress who stole from him to help others team up to fight poverty. It had everything: wealth, crime, redemption, social justice. Cable news shows booked me for interviews where the host tried to get me to admit I was either a criminal or a naive puppet being manipulated by a guilty rich man trying to buy his way into heaven. The scrutiny was intense. Reporters dug into every aspect of my life, every decision I'd made as program director, every dollar we'd spent. They interviewed my neighbors, my ex-husband, Mia's teachers. They found people we'd helped who were willing to criticize our methods, people we'd turned away who felt we'd been unfair, former employees who had axes to grind. For 3 weeks, it felt like my entire life was being dissected on national television. Mia started having panic attacks because kids at school were teasing her about her mommy being on TV. I had to hire security because protesters were showing up at our apartment building. Robert offered to pay for us to stay at a hotel until things calmed down, but I refused. Running away would just confirm everything our critics were saying about us. Instead, I decided to fight back, but not the way they expected. I didn't hire a PR firm or hold defensive press conferences. I didn't try to spin the story or deflect blame. Instead, I did something that completely caught everyone off guard. I invited Richard Graves to spend a week with me, shadowing my work, seeing exactly what we did and how we did it. I challenged him to find waste, corruption, or manipulation. I offered to open every file, every bank account, every decision-making process to his scrutiny. Most politicians would have ignored the challenge or demanded impossible conditions. But Graves was smart enough to realize that refusing would make him look like he was afraid of the truth. So he accepted. That week changed everything, not just for Graves, but for the entire conversation around what we were doing. On day 1, Graves was confrontational, clearly expecting to find evidence of fraud or incompetence. He questioned every expenditure, every hiring decision, every program requirement. He interviewed clients, staff members, community partners. He was looking for the catch, the hidden agenda, the proof that we were somehow exploiting the people we claimed to help. By day 3, his demeanor started to change. He met Mrs. Chen and saw how her tutoring program had raised reading scores in the local elementary school by 40%. He visited the Riverside Community Garden and watched neighbors who used to cross the street to avoid each other working side by side to prepare beds for winter planting. He interviewed Marcus about what it meant to have his children back home, stable and thriving. On day 5, Graves asked to extend his visit for another week. By the end of his time with us, Richard Graves had become one of our strongest advocates. But more than that, he'd become a convert to our approach. At a packed city council meeting, he stood up and delivered what the local newspaper called the most powerful speech of his political career. He talked about what he'd learned, what he'd seen, what he'd been wrong about. He admitted that his opposition had been based more on political calculation than genuine concern for his constituents. And then he did something unprecedented. He proposed that the city partner with our initiative to replicate our model in districts throughout the metropolitan area, using a combination of private funding and public resources. The proposal passed unanimously. Within 6 months, 5 other cities had adopted similar partnerships. Within a year, we were operating in 37 cities across 8 states. The criticism didn't disappear entirely, but it shifted. Instead of questioning whether our work was legitimate, critics focused on whether it was sustainable or scalable. These were fair questions, and they pushed us to become better, more transparent, more accountable. We published detailed annual reports, underwent voluntary audits, created advisory boards with community representation. We developed metrics not just for measuring immediate outcomes, but for tracking long-term community health and stability. And through it all, Mia was watching. My daughter, who had once seen me exhausted and defeated, working jobs that barely paid enough to survive, was now seeing me build something that mattered. She was learning that taking risks for the right reasons wasn't just acceptable, it was essential. She was learning that sometimes you have to break small rules to fix big problems. But mostly, she was learning that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they're willing to bet everything on their beliefs. Last month, on the 3-year anniversary of the night I found Robert Harrison's wallet, Mia asked me if I ever regretted taking that money without permission. I thought about it for a long time before answering. The truth is complicated. What I did was technically theft. I took something that didn't belong to me, used it in ways the owner hadn't authorized, and put my freedom and my daughter's security at risk based on nothing more than a gut feeling about a stranger's character. But regret? No. I don't regret it, because sometimes the right thing and the legal thing aren't the same thing. Sometimes you have to trust that the universe puts opportunities in your path for a reason, and the biggest sin isn't taking the risk, it's letting fear keep you from taking it. What would have happened if I just called Robert Harrison that night, returned his wallet, and gone back to my 3 jobs and my impossible choices? He'd have gotten his wallet back and probably never thought about me again. Mrs. Chen would still be eating cat food. Tommy would still be sleeping in his car. Marcus would have lost his children. The Riverside neighborhood would still be a collection of strangers avoiding eye contact, and 47 families wouldn't have fresh vegetables on their tables. And me? I'd still be invisible, still surviving instead of living, still teaching my daughter that working hard wasn't enough to get ahead in this world. Instead, because I chose to trust a stranger's character and bet everything on the possibility that kindness could be strategic, hundreds of families have better lives. Dozens of communities are stronger. And my daughter is growing up believing that one person really can make a difference if they're willing to risk everything to prove it. The Community Investment Initiative now operates in 43 cities. We've helped over 2,000 families, prevented hundreds of evictions, funded dozens of small businesses, and created thousands of jobs. But the numbers don't tell the real story. The real story is that we've proven something important about human nature and social change. We've proven that most people struggling with poverty aren't looking for handouts. They're looking for opportunities. We've proven that communities can solve their own problems if they have the right resources and support. We've proven that wealth can be a tool for justice instead of inequality, if it's wielded by people who understand what justice looks like from the bottom up. And maybe most importantly, we've proven that sometimes the most important qualification for leadership isn't experience or education or connections. Sometimes it's just understanding what it feels like to have everything on the line and choosing to fight anyway. 3 years ago, I was a waitress who couldn't afford her daughter's medication. Today, I'm testifying before Congress about poverty policy, advising mayors on community development, and speaking at Harvard Business School about social entrepreneurship. It sounds like a fairy tale, but it's not. It's just what happens when desperation meets opportunity and someone is brave enough to bet on both. Robert Harrison is still my partner in this work, still the man who took a risk on a waitress who stole his credit card to help her neighbors. But our relationship has evolved beyond mentor and student, beyond benefactor and recipient. We're colleagues now, equals in the fight against the systems that keep good people trapped in impossible situations. He brings resources and connections. I bring perspective and passion. Together, we're building something that neither of us could have created alone. And Mia, she's 10 now, old enough to understand what we do and why we do it. Sometimes she comes to work with me during school breaks, helping sort applications or playing with the kids at our family resource centers. She's seen firsthand how small interventions can change entire trajectories, how strategic kindness can break cycles of poverty that have trapped families for generations. Last week, she asked me if she could start her own initiative when she grows up, something focused on helping kids whose parents work multiple jobs. She wants to create after-school programs that don't just provide childcare, but also tutoring and meals and safe spaces where children can just be children instead of worrying about grown-up problems. I told her she doesn't have to wait until she grows up to start changing the world. Sometimes the most powerful changes begin with the smallest acts of courage. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to believe that things can be different and brave enough to risk everything to prove it. Sometimes it starts with finding a wallet on table 6 and choosing to trust in the kindness of strangers. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that stranger turns out to be someone who believes in the same impossible dream, that we can build a world where hard work and good intentions are enough, where kindness is strategic, and where every person matters enough to invest in. That's the world we're building, one family, one community, one risk at a time, and we're just getting started.